All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for standing with us through a few technical difficulties there, but we're ready to start. Thanks for joining us. My name is Thomas Meredith, and I'll be moderating today's webcast. On behalf of the Resource Management Institute, I would like to welcome you to the 4th Annual State of Resource Management Address. We're really excited today because we're going to present the latest resource management research and discuss trends and best practices being used to address some of the resource management challenges that we found. Before we get started, I'm going to cover just a few housekeeping items. We've loaded a PDF copy of today's deck into the handouts window of your GoToWebinar panel there on the right. Feel free to download that when you're ready. For your convenience, it's there for you. And we're also recording the webcast. Once we archive it and process it on our end, we will send out an email with a link to the recording. Feel free to watch that back at your convenience and share with any colleagues who are not able to join us today. And finally, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end of the webcast. I did mention we will be covering quite a bit of research. I hope that triggers some questions and some comments that you want to share. So your questions window there on the right of your GoToWebinar panel, you can enter in your questions there. I'll be pulling those throughout the webcast. And before the end of the hour, we will have a brief Q&A. Okay, that covers my items. I'm going to get out of the way here. Let's get started. Presenting today's webinar is the Managing Director of the Resource Management Institute, Randy Mislovic. Randy, welcome. I'll hand it off to you.
Fantastic. Thomas, thank you very much for the introduction and for getting us set up. This is Randy Mislovic, Managing Director of the RMI, and I want to welcome everyone to our 4th Annual State of Resource Management, latest research and best practices. We really appreciate your participation in our growing community of resource management interested professionals. And I want to do a special call out to our exclusive sponsor for today's event, Kimball. So let me just start with lay the ground here for our agenda for today. I'm going to start with a quick review of the RMI and the community for those of you who are new to joining us with this really important event today. I would like to also then share some perspectives that will provide really hopeful good baseline foundational context for what will become the bulk or the meat of this presentation, where we'll discuss observations, research, and best practices for resource management. We'll conclude with some tools that you can use. The RMI's got a ton of stuff that you can use, some fee, some free, but a lot of it free from our website that can help you do a better job of managing resources in your organizations. And then we'll wrap up with, as Thomas mentioned, a Q&A and try to take the questions that you all have. We'll be using the question box, which we'll moderate at the end of this presentation and try to get everyone's questions answered if possible. So let me start with the overview of the RMI. For those of you not familiar, we are dedicated to the advancement of resource and workforce management thought leadership, best practices and standards, globally recognized credentials that certify resource and workforce management. We'll talk about the RMCP program later on in this broadcast, and the tools and resources necessary for effective and efficient management of human capital intensive businesses. We are trying hard to provide what we believe is the world's only community with a vehicle to advance the discipline of resource management and further the interests of people in this community who have an interest in resource management. So that's a little bit about the RMI. If you haven't been to our website, resourcemanagementinstitute.com, I would encourage you to do so. We have a recently developed and mobile-friendly website. By the way, it is free to join the Resource Management Institute. And in joining, you get an opportunity to collaborate with your industry peers through events like this, but we also run other events like quarterly power-up sessions on specific resource management topics. We also have some terrific forum tools to allow you to either publicly or privately collaborate with your industry management peers in the industry, and a number of other things that allow you to do this. Innovation, we certainly believe, what we're trying to do is bring thought leadership to this discipline and domain. And through both the things that are available through the website, like our white paper library as an example, as well as our RMCP tools for people who go through the certification program. We've got an extensive library of tools that are available exclusively to them, to do this. And certainly last is to help you become educated on resource management. We've got multiple types of courses available to include our resource management certified professional program, and which we'll talk more about later on in this broadcast. So the RMI at its heart is trying to help you address three very specific problems that face the industry. One's project performance. I mean, whether or not you're an enterprise IT or professional consulting services running a services business or a project-based business, industry data is very conclusive that about a third of the projects we start today are going to fail at some level, either failure in taking too long, costing too much, quality is not what we want it to be, the functionality we promised wasn't there. We have utilization of our resources is lower than we intended, driving up our costs, or perhaps we're having negative customer satisfaction as a result of our project performance problems. And you know, the research the Institute's been doing for quite some time will point to four things that really drive these challenges in our businesses. One is a lack of a very specific process discipline for resource management. A second is a turnover of capable resource managers. The whole idea of a resource manager in that role, 10 years ago hardly existed. It's come a long way in that period of time, and we think will continue to grow exponentially over the next 10 to 20 years. But turnover of those people that know how to do this is causing some pain. Insufficient automation tools, whether you have a PSA or PPM tool or some other specific tool for resource management, these tools have come a long way over the last 10 years, but they still have areas that they can continue to improve. We'll actually talk about that a bit today. And then lack of formalized education is, a lot of folks have been to quality schools and project management schools, but how many organizations have sent somebody to formal foundational education for resource management? And we see that as continued inhibitor to the businesses. So anyway, so we hope you'll come to join the Resource Management Institute. Just go to our website. You can put in your name and an email, and you're on your way. So let me move on to some perspectives, and I hope that this short section, again, will provide some good context for all of you to understand the observations and research and best practices that we're going to discuss that'll provide the meat of this presentation over this coming hour. So you'll find that we broke the data in this presentation down where possible into enterprise IT for internal IT or shared IT services organizations, or professional and consulting services, largely in the technology world, for projects and services-based businesses. So you'll see us use these two icons as we go through a lot of the data to see a breakout that hopefully that'll be helpful, because we do have those segments of people joining this broadcast. By the way, this by far the biggest broadcast we've done as an institute. The institute continues to grow at an exponential pace. Thank you for your interest and participation, and we hope it will continue to grow and develop. We all have at some level, the struggle really comes down to finding that balance between our internal or external projects, application development, maintenance or enhancements, or it could be training, or the various things our services personnel do for us, with the people that are available, the budget, the time, the tools, the skills they have, where those folks are located. These are things that all of you know very, very well are constant challenges in our organization. So we're all striving to find a better balance in what we do. When we, as I mentioned, we're going to talk a lot about our growing library of research, and I'll ask all of you also to, if you haven't participated, to participate in some of our research. We have, you'll find various research data we're going to share throughout the day that's based on more than 200 responses. By the way, that's growing rapidly every day for us. With data that we hope will be valuable to you in doing peer benchmarking in your organization. But really importantly, just to follow the flow of where I was going with this conversation, is we asked organizations, what's your primary objective for resource management? And in enterprise IT, they told us utilization and cost effectiveness and capacity planning were tied for first in what they were focused on with resource management. For professional consulting services, improving utilization and cost effectiveness we're the #1 objective for resource management, with project staffing being a secondary objective. Now, to just pique everyone's interest a little bit, we're going to continue to push this important point and notion of that we think project performance should become the higher industry priority for organizations. And, essentially tell you why is that if it's hopefully, as people think about what we do every day in our services-based or project-based businesses, we're producing projects to solve a business problem, whether it's for an internal user or for an external client. And those projects involve us getting available resources with the right skills, who are in the right location, with the right level, more junior person, do I need a more senior person, the cost of the person, can I do this onshore versus offshore? There's all these questions we're asking ourselves each and every day as we're getting ready to execute what ultimately is a project that is, or a service that via the recipient is somebody internally or an external client. And we want to deliver these things on time, on budget, with the right quality, the right functionality. We've embraced this into a process-based solution we call just-in-time resourcing, or how do you get the right person in the right place at the right moment in time? And I'll come back and talk about JITR, as we affectionately call it, JITR. So we also asked, by the way, in a survey, that's currently still open. We're going to keep it open for the bulk of March, and I'll show you how you can participate in a research survey later on in this broadcast. These surveys are generally 8 to 9 questions. You can do them in under 10 minutes, and you'll get back the information from these surveys for free for participating in those surveys. So when we ask the question in the currently open survey that is focused on resource management inhibitors, this is what people are telling us so far. We've already gotten a large number of responses to this particular survey. What gets in the way is having the right dedicated and skilled resource managers is about 18% of the responses for folks. By the way, you could answer more than one thing here if you wanted. And look at this, nearly 70% said process design and or implementation of that process design was getting in the way. And also interesting was that 62% of you said our PSA or PPM tool were getting in the way of us having effective resource management. So, the industry is definitely not on autopilot for resource management. So stay tuned as we go through here with additional information, but hopefully this helps you understand it. People working in the RM discipline, you're not alone with some of the problems that you're facing. We attended as a company the Gartner PPM conference in summer 2016, and one of the things that Donna Fitzgerald, who was at the time running that conference and a research analyst for Gartner, put up this particular slide that talked about in enterprise IT. Again, she had data that said basically a third of the projects that start that day were going to fail at some level over the coming year or so. And she also pointed, by the way, interesting enough, to data pointing back to 1996 when a lot of the focus on project management had begun, and said that back then project failures were in the 35% range, and here we are 20 years later, and our project failures in enterprise IT is still approaching the 35% range. And so, and the reason simply we at the RMI simply believe, as this data also shows, is organizations have not focused hard enough on resource management. And, we would contend, way back on a white paper research we did in our parent company, RTM Consulting, 8 years ago, that if you don't master resource management, you can apply all the project management and quality methodologies you want, and you'll never get to where you really want to be relative to serious reduction of your project failures in your organization. So data doesn't lie, and it's hopefully something to think about. So when we think about your organization, when you think about your organization and grading your own performance, whether it's on time, on budget, you're generating things best degree quality, do you have good utilization, good responsiveness to your customers, whether they're internal or external. The important thing here to look at is can you do it consistently? Because I would contend to you, the RMI would contend to you that that's what process is all about. Process drives consistency, consistent business outcomes. And when we see inconsistency in resource management results, it usually points to a lack of process discipline or the ability to automate those processes in an effective way, or both. So something to think about. I mentioned three things that we're focused on: project performance, utilization, and customer sat. But I would also tell you that the RMI in our time in existence, as well as the parent company that's been focused on resource management since roughly 2007, we've found two other really important benefits to organizations. Reduced attrition is the ability to have a more predictable environment for your employees. Creating less chaotic working environments produces higher employee satisfaction. We see that all the time. And the same thing is true of reduced management time. We're really surprised how many organizations continue to invest so much management time in phone tag and email tag and the things necessary to locate the resources necessary to do our services or project-based work, when there's processes and automation solutions to help you do that in a much more efficient and effective manner. Not to mention, by the way, one obvious benefit is just if your labor cost is $50 an hour, you can look at those and just say, if I was a 200-person organization, improved my utilization of my workforce by 5%, I'd produce $1 million or more of benefit to the bottom line. So there are tremendous benefits to organizations for doing this right. So we'll talk more about a process solution as we're talking about best practices as we go through here, but just-in-time resourcing is how we embrace our global resource management methodology into a commercial grade solution for how do you manage resources in a highly efficient and predictable manner. And it's made up of these 6 different elements that we have solutions for to help you with how to do resource management in a much more efficient and an effective manner. So you'll hear us talk more about this as we go through this. So let me get to the best part of this broadcast today, where we'll discuss 5 different best practices and show you supporting research behind those to help you understand, why we think these things are so important as best practices to help your project or service-based businesses run in a more efficient and effective manner. And as I mentioned, we'll break the data where available out between enterprise IT and professional and consulting services. So we started off our survey with focus on strategy and management topics. And out of that, not to mention the survey, just the survey, but our own experience in working with many organizations, well over 100 organizations on resource management issues over the years, is too many organizations silo off resources into logical groups, either e.g. departments or geographies or whatever sub-optimized grouping organization may have chosen. And we believe that strongly sub-optimizes the ability of the enterprise to take full advantages of the resources that are ultimately owned by the enterprise. 10 years ago in professional consulting services, we would see the siloing of resources as very common. We've certainly seen a reduction of that over the last 10 years. There's a way to go. Enterprise IT, though, I would just say that the more prevalent, and you'll see some of the data behind this, is still more siloed approaches to resource management. And from a thought leadership standpoint, we're going to continue to appeal to enterprise IT organizations to think about the resource management more on a centralized point of view as opposed to a decentralized point of view. I don't want people to confuse, by the way, decentralization of resource management with a management approach. We're talking about how do you manage a process, the actual management of resources themselves, the people managers of these people. And we're not making a statement about whether or not that should be centralized or decentralized. So let me keep going with some data here that will hopefully be helpful to you to understand some of the points that we're making as we're talking about this. So I talked about the observation number 1, the siloing of organizations, and so we looked at, okay, how do you organize your businesses for management of resources? And you can see very clearly in enterprise IT a functional approach to this is by far the most dominant approach to how organizations do that. No surprise, none by industry, but a growing number of centralized and some by geography, but still a more functionally dominant approach to this. And as I mentioned, professional services clearly grouping more organizations into a centralized approach to that. Again, we think that still has a way to go in organizations. And to be clear, it's not that we think that in every case the approach should be centralized, but we rarely find an organization or situation where a centralized approach won't produce some benefits. And as a matter of fact, we also have research data that basically shows that your entities, whether you're enterprise IT or PS or CS, are 40% more likely to have lower utilization when managed in a decentralized fashion. Data doesn't lie. So we'll start off with our first best practice. Number one is using a centralized approach to resource management, creating transparent visibility enterprise-wide to all available resources. You know, one way that I often say it to executives in companies is resources are assets of the corporation. They are not assets of a particular geography, department, or functional group. So one best practice is focus on, you know, what can I do to think more centrally about, at least about the availability of who do I have that's available with those skills and where are they located to do work on our services-based or project-based resources. Utilization, obviously, on everyone's mind. It was, you know, near the top of the list for, you know, both PS and enterprise IT organizations. And so we took a look at and asked people to tell us what your average utilization was. Now, important to understand that this data reflects a mixed use of different denominators. And I'll talk more about this because one of the things we are trying to do in the Institute is to drive toward an industry standard. We believe the 2080 standard is the way to go because it'll allow organizations to have peer benchmarking. We'll show you some normalized data here in a moment, but wanted to show you, you know, the basic again is we had people that it was all over the board of people that said, I'm using 2080 as my denominator. Some people using the 1560 standard, some people using the 1768 standard, depending on whether or not you wanted to extract vacations or vacations plus training and things out of your denominator. But it's hard to compare yourself to your peers when people are using a different math in order to do those comparisons. So this is just raw data that we're looking at here. We think it's, quite frankly, directionally interesting, but mostly meaningless. But what we did do was take that data and have normalized it for you. And for the simple you know, observational purpose of peer benchmarking is imperative. If you want to do fact-based identification of improvement opportunities, and that's what the Institute is focused on, is giving you data, giving you facts, and helping you find the right kind of processes and technology to help you solve resource management problems. Knowing where you really stand is an important starting point. So industry standardization of utilization measures will lay the foundation for peer benchmarking. We've made a lot of progress both with the parent company, RTM Consulting, and with the Institute. In the 10 years the parent's been in existence and driving this into the industry, we're a lot farther along than we were 10 years ago, but we have ways to go. So this is the normalized data. And it basically shows you the same information I showed 2 slides earlier that shows enterprise IT normalized to a 2080 standard. And that basically says that, you know, those folks are seeing 68 to 77% utilization. Greater than 77% is about 2/3 versus a third that were lower than that. We would tell you that based on, you know, what we believe best practice to be, that that third on the low side have certainly a fair amount of room for improvement. And we also think, by the way, the people in the bar on the right have room for improvement as well. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. On the PSCS side, you know, that grouping of the 2 left bars there, below 67%, you know, basically, you know, says that when you look at those organizations, 35% of your employees are performing well below what we would consider industry standard or industry benchmarks for what we believe good looks like. Now, I would say there's some granularity to how we think about utilization of people. So if you have a person who's an architect versus a heads-down programmer, we would expect those individuals' utilization to be different because the nature of their work is different. And we have data underlying this that has benchmark information around that. But clearly, you got about a third of those people not where they need to be. And if I translated that to some number, I'm sure that it would be literally hundreds of millions, if not billions, of lost money in the industry because we're simply not managing those resources efficiently. So we strongly recommend, as a best practice, is moving to the 2080 standard. The way you do that, if you're concerned about differences in vacation standards, because companies have vacation standards which differ not only within their companies based on years of service, but different countries have different labor standards and labor laws, and so vacation standards are different. So, but you can adjust for those things by setting different targets. So whether or not the type of work's different, the vacation standards are different, you can adjust your targets, but don't adjust your denominator. Focus on 2080, and then you can start using that to compare yourself to your peers. And we're going to continue to push more deeper research data out to the industry to help with in support of peer benchmarking. So I'll move beyond strategy and management to resource management processes. So you might remember an earlier slide I showed that about 60 plus 70% organizations said the process is getting in the way. And so, interesting, we took the data, by the way, this is a currently open survey, so we're still collecting inputs to this. We'd love to get more input and feedback. But whoa, we looked at this information, 90% of you that responded to that survey said, yes, we have process issues, from not properly designed to we didn't implement it effectively to we didn't have the right kind of training behind it. Or by the way, there's some other factors that are causing issues, and we have some breakdown of those, but I say not enough data to provide consistency. We were not comfortable sharing what some of that was yet today till we get a wider base of data. But this is really, really important that, again, not a surprise to us, is that RTM Consulting as a consulting company and the Institute focuses entirely on research and education and tools for resource management. Is we're doing that and focusing on it because the industry has just got a long ways to go in regards to resource management process development, as opposed to, by the way, again, project management and quality processes, which, by the way, we think are very important to businesses. We just don't think you're going to ever be as effective there as you want to be unless you get this resource management thing solved. So, observation number 3. Process documentation and training are fundamental to any successful business function. So, when we developed just-in-time resourcing, I was the individual sat down 10 years ago and started thinking about how to put this together into a solution that would make sense. And my beginnings in the technology industry, where I was an expert in just-in-time manufacturing. And for those of you who are old enough to remember, just-in-time manufacturing was about how do we help the industry find new ways to become more effective and efficient and predictable in how we manufacture things. And, at the time, disparate inventories and spending too much on inventory and having closed factories because our parts didn't show up on time was an issue. And so just-in-time manufacturing was all about coming up with a mechanism to get the right part in the right place at the right moment of time with the right manufacturing capacity to build that widget when I wanted it, not too soon, not too late. And I simply took the idea and applied it to human capital. And I recognize that managing people is certainly different than managing parts and manufacturing, but many of the concepts are the same. And what we're trying to do with just-in-time resourcing is apply, or some other methodology, by the way, is apply process discipline to produce predictable outcomes for project performance, better utilization, better cost effectiveness. And those things are strongly predicated, as any good process is, on a documented process that people are trained on and a governance process that says, okay, where's the process working? Where's it broken? How can we continuously improve on that process? So that's our third observation, and I'd love to share with you some data that kind of tells you where I think we're at as an industry as it relates to formal documented processes as an example. So in enterprise IT, about 20% of you said we're not there, and about 80% of you said we do have one. Now, I'll call you back, remind you back to an earlier slide where you said, yeah, I do have a process, but it's got holes and gaps and issues in it. And when we sorted through the underlying data, clearly enterprise IT will acknowledge that while we have a process, we need to make it a lot better. On the PSCS side, a surprise to us actually that because that group has been, quite frankly, at it longer, but yet 23% saying we don't have a formal documented process. So best practice number 3 is implement a documented RM process with supporting training. So it is not surprising, but problematic that roughly a quarter of companies operate without a documented process for what arguably constitutes the biggest single driver of project cost and performance, which is people. And if there's anything we're going to get good at, we should get good at how do we manage the most expensive line item on our profit and loss statements, and it's human capital, people. So getting a documented RM process with supporting process in place, really, really important to the organization. Now, how do you go about developing your processes? So we wanted to know how people went about, getting their process in place on enterprise IT. About 3/4 of you said, "Hey, we have internally developed ours." Some of us, none of us did that talking to our peer groups, and then we had about 15% have said they adopted Jitter, and I just realized we had other industry sources should have been shown on that legend, so that was a miss on my part. Anyway, so the good news is that a lot of people have documented processes, and I would assert that whether you develop it internally or externally is, I always ask about can you buy before you build, and ask that question. And so we've got a commercial grade process solution available that you certainly should at least consider. But we've made a huge amount of progress with just-in-time resourcing in a pretty short period of time, as the industry really is trying to get to adoption of a better industry standard that they don't have to make up on their own. Then PS and CS, again, about a 12% adoption rate, and again, about not quite 3/4 of you who developed your process on your own. So process maturity. This was a really interesting one as well for us. Is for enterprise IT is with RM key to project performance, overall labor costs. The industry just got to get better at this. But as we were looking at this particular data, is that 50% of you said we're not very matured on the enterprise IC side, and another 40% said, you're only medium there. And again, I'll continue to beat on this point on a process that is focused on the single biggest cost you have on your P&Ls. And on the professional and consulting services side, again, these organizations generally as an industry have been at this a bit longer on the resource management side. But wow, 25% low, and nearly 55% saying we were only medium, with only 18% saying we're well matured in this area. So the organizations clearly acknowledge that they have room for improvement in this area, and something that's really, really important. So I talked earlier about organization and how organization works, and how we are organized, centrally, decentrally. And so we wanted to look at this a little bit deeper, and the concept of the resource management office, which I know many of you are familiar with, is clearly accelerating. It's more widely adopted in professional consulting services than in enterprise IT. We like to believe we were the industry catalyst 10 years ago to move the industry in this direction of building resource management offices, similar to how project management organizations have built project management offices to drive more efficiency and effectiveness in project management, and successfully so, by the way. We think the concept of PMO is a very good one, just as we believe the concept of an RMO can offer many benefits to organizations. And with the RM being so mission critical to project performance and efficient use of resources, we think dedicating an RMO to management of this mission critical function is important. Important to point out, even a small organization, the RMO office concept doesn't have to be a room full of people. It could be a concept of a function that maybe even in the smallest of organizations is owned and run by one person, but it drives to drive process standardization throughout an organization for efficient use of resources is really important. So we asked the question in a survey that who owns resource management in your enterprise? And in enterprise IT, this is what you told us, is that the concept of the RMO is clearly taken hold. We've made a lot of progress just in the last 2 or 3 years. The PMO in a lot of places owns that responsibility, 30%, the operations function another 35%, and we had a few in the other category. On the professional consulting services side, we've made a tremendous amount of progress. This same thing 10 years ago, when we were asking this question, I don't have data support would tell you I think the number would have been well under 10%. So we made a ton of progress there. The project management office, a lot of time we've seen the RMO splitting off from the PMO. We're not suggesting that is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, but that has been a general trend to see that the operations function taking up about 25% of that. You can read the rest of the slide. But and clearly the RMO is a growing trend in enterprise IT, still trailing professional consulting services. But we believe best practice number 4, if you don't have one, build a resource management office. You get a ton of benefits for that. So when we ask organizations, so what are those RMOs focus on? What do you focus on as an organization for process improvement in your project-based or services-based business? This is what you told us. You said that, and by the way, this is one where you could have answered multiple things that you were working on, about 2/3 saying we're focused on our skills inventory. An area, by the way, where we see, there's 2 things we would call out that organizations really struggle with and is really holding them back is around building a skills inventory, building better forecasting and planning, and third is governance. And no surprise, those top the answers in all your responses. When our RTM Consulting does a consulting project in this area, we typically find an assessment. Those are the 3 areas that are most lacking in organizations. But this is what you told us in the survey. But you can see the other processes. So again, you're not alone. These are the things that your peer groups are focused on relative to improving their performance in resource management by producing and building better processes. So automation tools, also important to this. Any good process in today's environment, particularly where you have lots of resources, lots of projects, a big services business, there's a ton of really good automation tools that are out there that are available to help you with this. Interesting enough, when we asked in the currently open survey, by the way, we'd encourage you again to go out and take the survey, and I'll show you how to do that here in a few minutes, is regarding automation tools. When it came to looking at that for current tool, here's what you told us is, interesting enough, on the effective and required no changes, look at it, you notice there's no blue bar because there were 0 responses for that. So everybody thinks there's something that they could get more out of the tool. Somewhat effective, but could be improved was 38%, a known area for improvement, another 38%. And interesting enough, probably for the PSA PPM vendors who are joining us today, is 22% are looking to replace their tools. And those are for a variety of reasons. Either they have an older generation tool and are looking to replace it with a newer one, or perhaps they bought a tool that wasn't the best match. But I'll talk more about that here in a moment. So as I lead into that, observation number 5, too many PSA PPM buyers are buying when decisions that are made when they thought that the tool alone was going to solve the problem. And I can't tell you how often we hear that, but it's a lot. And nothing could be further from the truth. Is a tool without a process simply doesn't work. We can think of any other parts of our business, whether it's project management or quality management or manufacturing processes or whatever it might happen to be. A tool without a process simply doesn't work. So more companies really need to proceed any buying decision with at least thinking about what's my target process going to look like? So as I'm thinking about buying a new PSA or PPM tool, or reconfiguring the one I have, or upgrading the one that I have, I ought to build use cases, which is what our consulting company does, but build use cases that will allow someone to say, show me how the technology will support my process and my workflows the way I need to be able to do this, as a way to help you make a better choice relative to your support. So we also ask the question, how happy are you with your PSA or PPM tool? So, people on the left-hand side of this slide, Enterprise IT, largely more bought PPM tools. Those on the right-hand side have largely bought PSA tools. I clearly would tell you we are seeing a blending of those two over time. Is more PSA tool providers provide more functionality, make it look more like a PPM tool, and the PPM providers going the other way toward the PSA world. But the net of this data is a third of those users are not happy with the solution they chose. And we would contend that best practice number 5 is let your requirements drive a use case driven selection process for automation tools. Process design is really where it's at. It is, what's my process I need to support my business? What's the workflow? How are things going to flow through my business? Now, show me how that tool, either a new one or reconfigured, or an upgrade to my tool, is going to allow me to do a better job of resource management. So when we asked, no surprise here, but hopefully again, this is I'm sure has caught the attention of many PSA PPM providers, is that the number one reason organizations, number one function they're looking for today in enterprise IT or PS and CS is because people have come to realize that project performance has many elements to it, but top of the list is resource management. So with project performance and adapting to new agile needs, is strong RM performance is necessary, and users are becoming more focused on RM functionality and robust process support than ever before. Now, you can see in the slide, there's other things that are important to people, and so it's not the only thing on here. We had things like reporting and dashboarding, really important for a lot of folks. Time management's really important. Project management capability is important. But really interesting data. Resource management is really top of mind for everybody. We asked people to tell you, how do you feel about the RM functionality you are getting out of your PSA PPM tool? And again, this is a pretty interesting data. 47% enterprise IT users, so either dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. So don't know all the underlying reasons. There's a big bucket of what those are, what they might be, but interesting data. And again, even on the PSA PPM side, if you include those that are neutral on that, which generally I don't think is a positive response, is I got nearly 40% of users saying I'm not happy with my resource management functionality. Now, interesting enough, we do see a higher level on the PSCS side, because we saw that organizations that are producing PSA tools picked up the RM mantra earlier than PPM providers did and started working on this earlier. And so no surprise when we saw this data. But the PPM vendors are catching up fast, and there's a number of them who have decided that they put this high on their new development and new release plans for their products. So inhibitors in our automation support for resource management. So again, we'll let people tell us, click all that apply here, and you can read through this data. But again, really interesting. Dashboarding and reporting came as the number one item on this list. But feature lack of features, not having it configured properly, which by the way often we find is because people didn't think through their process well enough. Integration with my front end, back end systems are issues. So companies really need to focus on building better process and workflow centric use cases. So when you're picking a tool, you pick one that's going to better hit the mark. So I'm going to summarize these 5 practices and then move on and talk about some of the tools that are available to you. So I'll recap again, just a reminder, is a central approach, or an even a more central approach, creating transparent and visibility to all of your resources in the enterprise is definitely a way to go. You have a 40% higher chance of having lower utilization if you don't do that. Number 2, benchmark your operational efficiency using 2080. Move to the 2080 denominator. You'll get better peer benchmarking data, and it's much, much easier to compare not only to your peers, but to internal groups that may have different standards based on the geographies they're in, the clientele they're serving, the type of work they're doing, et cetera. And the 2080 standard is definitely the way to go. And industry, by the way, is rapidly moving in that direction anyway, and we're really trying to drive that home. A documented process and supporting training are really, really important, irrespective of whether or not you use the process solution that the RMI can provide in our training, or you do your own. Is having both of those is going to help you move your ball forward more. Building an RMO we think is really, really important. If you don't have one, you should get one. If you have one, you ought to make it better. Just like the PMOs have been very advantageous to the project management community, we think an RMO will do the same thing here. Number 5, let your process requirements drive a use case driven selection process for automation tools. No question about it, we think having an automation tool, PSA or good PSA or PPM tool here is mission critical. If you have 15, 20, 25 resources or more in the organizations, and we all know it starts to get pretty complicated with spreadsheets. These tools are really robust. There's a lot of really capable ones out there. They become very affordable. They're not that difficult to justify when you look at the benefits of better resource management leading to better project performance. These are 5 things we hope you all take away. Put this page off and put it up in your cubicles or in your office wall or whatever, but doing these 5 things will help your organizations get better. Now, I mentioned you can join the RMI for free. And when you join the RMI, you can go out there and you can get access to things like this research. You can get access to the biggest library of white papers we think you'll find on resource management anywhere. Collaboration tools, we've got a great forum. Would love to get people more engaged in the forum. We have our next Power Up session. It's a topic that's on forecast and capacity planning. I believe it's coming up March 28th. You can register through, again, it's free to join. It's a half an hour. It'll be hard hitting with actionable information on how to do a better job of those things in your business. But we've got 4 topics with multiple sponsors for those sessions. They're on. We hope you'll take a look at those. Other events and webcasts that are coming up, I'd ask you to keep watching this website. We are thinking about a fall conference or symposium, which we're working on, and we aren't ready to make a commitment to that yet, but it's definitely on our radar. We've got lots of people asking us for that. And then, if you're an RMCP grad, you get an even broader toolkit to use for your businesses. And by the way, this stuff, again, is, except for the RMCP certification, all free. So there is I referred to the inhibitor surveys. We were going through this today. So if you want to participate in that currently open survey, you can go to resourcemanagementinstitute.com/RMI-survey and take the survey. It takes less than 10 minutes, and you'll get free access to the outcome of that survey. So before I get to our Q&A session, let me wrap up with a few things that I hope you'll all think about. I mentioned these 3 things we're focused on, and that lack of education is certainly part of the problem. Not to mention the lack of an industrial grade process solution for resource management. And we have an answer to that, and it's called the Resource Management Certified Professional Program. It's the first of its kind certified professional skills development program where you get the opportunity to learn best practices, to gain access to our resource library for RMCPs, to collaborate with your peers. And there are scores of companies that are putting their resource managers through these. As a sample of some of the kinds of companies that put people through the program. We have some companies that literally put hundreds of people through our certification program as a way to drive toward a standardized process in an organization, a standardized view of how a resource management office should work, a standardized view of how we should do forecasting, how we do various things that are resource management related. And we do that, by the way, by teaching you either in a 3-day on-site class, which we can do privately at your location, or at our location here at our headquarters in Cincinnati, or you can participate in, we had an online session start literally today, where you can attend 2 hours a week for 6 weeks. with a little bit of homework, and the core program provides interactive lectures and case study workshops and things, followed with an online certification exam. There is a recertification process to recertify every couple of years, but you can do this all online, or again, you can do it at a private class in your location or at ours. It's $1,795 per person. Pretty much everything's included. If you're a PMP and you take this certification and you do the in-class version, you get 16 and a quarter PDUs for doing that. And if you take the online version, you get 13.25 PDUs. We are also a registered education provider of the Project Management Institute. By the way, when somebody takes this course, your company also gets a robust industry's process solution for resource management. So think back about, do I want to build this or buy it? Just another benefit you get. Our next in-class course, April 17th through the 19th here in Cincinnati. We've got seats still left in that course, although it is filling up. And we started an online course today. By the way, you can still join that course. We record that session so that people who missed a particular session can record 1 week of a makeup. We don't have a full course in recorded version. Just to be clear, there's also a March 5th online class coming up. And for those of you who want to jump into the May 23rd class, you can take advantage of our early bird pricing for that one. Go to the website and you can apply through the website for the RMCP program. I would also mention, just I've referred to the parent company, RTM Consulting, is we do lots of consulting work for companies on the resource management front, around assessing how we do resource management, helping us build an RMO, how to improve the performance. We even run RMOs for companies in some cases. So if you want to learn more about how we can help you, if you're not a DIY type of organization, you want more help, you can go to rtmconsulting.net or send us an email at info@rtmconsulting.net and you get help. Now, before I get to a Q&A, I do want to thank again our exclusive sponsor for this event, Kimball, and thank them for their support in helping to bring this broadcast to all of you. And you can learn more about Kimball at kimballapps.com. So with that, Thomas, I'm going to come to the Q&A, and I'll let you help moderate this for me, and we'll go from there.
Perfect, great, Randy. Thank you. That was fantastic. I'm really glad everyone on the line was able to see some of that valuable research that we've been collecting. So really good stuff. Yes, questions are coming in. Please keep them coming. We have a few minutes here at the end for our Q&A session. And Randy, I'll ask you to keep an eye on that too if I'm missing any coming in through the panel. Yep. Okay. Let me start here with this question that came in. I thought it was a good place to start because it talked about, it came in when you were talking about RM resource management's impact on project performance. So in your opinion, why haven't more firms adopted a structured approach earlier with RM being so impactful to project performance?
Yeah, it's a great question, Thomas. And we, again, run into this question a little less than we did, 2 or 3 years ago, and certainly less than we did 10 years ago. But I would recall it's been a bit baffling to me at times that human resources in project or service-based businesses is the most expensive asset we have, yet we've avoided putting most of our most of our process emphasis into that versus project management and quality management, which have gotten an enormous amount of spend, education, training, and investment. And again, I want to restate, it's not that we don't think those things are important. They're very important. But the data is really clear. If you don't get resource management right, you'll never get where you want to get with a good project management discipline or a good quality management discipline. And again, the data doesn't lie. And I showed several references to that earlier here. I just think that we need to use information like we're providing today to get that to senior executives in our companies to help them understand, hey, one of the things we need to spend more time thinking about in our company is resource management, better processes, better automation technology for that. And we think that'll produce a better outcome for organizations. So, it's culture, Thomas. It's built up over a long time. We are beginning to change, industry thinking and the culture in that, but we certainly have a ways to go.
Great. throughout the presentation, you brought up the just-in-time resourcing wheel a couple times. I had a couple different questions coming in about, where can I learn more about just-in-time resourcing, before they decide to invest maybe in the certification program?
Yeah, you can go to the RMI site, click the join, put your name in. It gets you beyond the firewall. It doesn't cost you anything. And you get access to a white paper library that we've got a ton of white papers out there on the concept, where it came from, the analogy I use with just-in-time manufacturing as an example to help people from that environment understand that contextually. But there's a ton of free information out there through our website on what this is all about, and again, that's all free.
Very good, very good. Looking at our panel as they come in here, this question came in. What are your thoughts on the supply and demand model to resource management?
Well, so supply and demand are important aspects of resource management, no question about it. I'm going to back up a slide here and go to this slide right here. Is supply and demand is typical when we see it is we see it focused on, okay, how many people do I have? And demand is, what do I have to do over a period of time? But we try through this solution to get people to think and really drive things like sourcing and development. Okay, I understand what my supply is, but where are they? What skills they have? What competencies they have? By the way, when are they taking a vacation? When are they taking a sabbatical? The skills inventories that we see are generally far deficient from where they need to be. And so we want people thinking a lot more holistically and deeply about supply and demand, way beyond just what we would typically see as a supply and demand model in an organization. Demand side, again, forecasting, I showed the data. Most organizations fail at this miserably. And we haven't come across an organization yet that can't and doesn't make improvements in forecasting capabilities that will drive much better. I mean, how do you plan for resourcing when you don't really know for sure what resources I'm going to need and what locations with what skill levels and what mixes, on March 27th. Really important here. So this puts supply and demand on steroids and really gets you to something that's much more precise. And by the way, we know human capital, creating capacity with the right skills, it doesn't materialize overnight. I can't just hire people overnight. I can't train them overnight. Right. It takes time to build skills and experience.
Right. Okay, a few more minutes here. I've got about 2 more minutes for the top of the hour, but I'd like to keep going and answer as many of these as we can. This one just came in. Does your process strive to ensure that utilization is adding value to the enterprise, not just improving the utilization percentage?
Short answer is absolutely. When we help people understand how to do this, we also help the RMO leader with how do you drive awareness of value that this is driving our businesses. I mean, today I don't know any business that will invest in process or technology or both without understanding what the prize is at the end of this. And so we help equip people with how are you driving more value, and that value isn't just utilization, but I focused a lot today on project performances, better project performance and what that means on being on time, on budget with better quality. Customer satisfaction is an example. So we get a lot more that a lot of benefits you can drive. I talked about, by the way, driving less chaotic environments, resulting in better employee satisfaction as an example. So lots of other benefits that we can help you, quantify and better communicate in your organizations to produce better outcomes.
Yes. Okay. Couple of questions come in about past broadcasts and different market research. I could certainly take this one, Randy. Yeah, our past market research, as Randy mentioned, the current survey, our past broadcasts are available on demand. Those are all available on resourcemanagementinstitute.com. You can go to the events page to pull down past webinars. You can go to our survey page to pull down our past research or take a current live survey. And also, Randy had mentioned our Power Up series. It's an educational webinar series, and we have access to on-demand presentations of that. So wanted to get that for you. And just let me get one more in here. I know we're getting closer to the top of the hour, but one more here for you, Randy. And it came in a few times. Does the certification program cover anything about automation solutions, right? I think everybody saw maybe that technology box in the just-in-time resourcing wheel. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We in the course or the program won't tell you a particular PSA PPM solution is just the best one or the right one for you, because again, we're true to our thought leadership in that the one solution that might be right for one company may not be the right one for the next company. Is let your process and workflow design drive what's really important for the organization. So we do talk about the application of PSA and PPM technology to a workflow or resource management intensive process, and the kinds of things that are important, things to look for, and by the way, how do you implement resource management using technology in a generic state? But the folks spent through the program tell them that it really gives folks a new perspective and a way to think about what you do when you're thinking about PSA or PPM systems. I also saw a quick note, one I could peel off real quickly. The difference between enterprise IT and professional consulting services is enterprise IT. Just think about any company who's got an internal enterprise IT department with IT workers that are shared, producing capabilities for an internal IT organization versus a hardware or software company selling professional consulting services to its hardware software buyers, and that's the distinction and all that.
Okay, great. I did see that one as well. Thanks. Okay, we're past the top of the hour here. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I appreciate everyone joining us today for our 4th annual State of Resource Management Address. Randy, thank you again. A lot of great research here, and as I mentioned before, I'm glad folks got to see that. We do have questions coming in. We'll keep looking at those, but for now, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us, and Randy, thank you as well.
Yeah, and Thomas, I also want to thank the group for joining us. Again, we'll have this again next year for our 5th annual broadcast. And if you had a question you had that didn't get answered, feel free to send a note to info@resourcemanagementinstitute.com, and we'll do our best to answer as many of those as we can. We see there are quite a few questions that come in we didn't get to, and we'll do our best to try to get people answers to those. Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.